All right, hello everyone. So we're live. So as the title suggests, we're going to be responding to bad criticisms of utilitarianism. Yeah. So we'll
I'm
be
Chris.
going over videos. Yeah. In fact, true. Okay. So we currently have viewers, but that'll change soon. So we'll be going over a variety of videos soon. All right. This anti-utilitarian owl. This owl is so disloyal. You know, the utilitarians are big advocates of caring about animals, and this freaking owl doesn't care about its fellow pigs and chickens and factory farms. It only cares about
a true counterexample to owls being wise.
Yep.
Act utilitarianism holds that whenever possible and no matter what, you need to act in the way that will bring the least pain or the most pleasure to the most people. So if you were faced in situations where the greatest good would come from you lying or...
Okay, this is a nitpick, but that is a false definition. It's not where it would either bring the least pain or the most pleasure, where it would, you should choose something if it would maximize the balance, the amount of pleasure minus pain. Like, it's not like, you know, if, but okay.
Cheating or stealing or even killing, you should do those actions. Well, that doesn't actually seem right to me. Why not? Well, firstly, it can allow for any action to take place as long as it generates the greatest good for the greatest number.
Well, okay.
Well, not any action,
Right, I mean, it can only allow the subset of actions that are... So now they're saying the greatest good for the greatest number. I think that this is another really misleading finding, because I think that the way to think of it is the greatest good overall, because the greatest good for the greatest number makes it sound like if something benefits the majority, then it's approved of by utilitarianism. But that's obviously false. If torturing one person, if two people gained a little bit of pleasure from torturing one person, that wouldn't be justified by pain.
So for the utilitarian, even the most vile, evil actions can be acceptable if they generate the most good. Yes, but...
Well, but this is just begging the question about them being vile and evil. So, like, you know, I mean, and I think that if we think about the actions that we think of as really vile and evil, they just happen to be actions that are generally really bad for well-being. So, like, you know, torture is one of the worst things you can do from the standpoint of well-being. But, like, in cases where... Like, let's take the example of torture. If you had to torture a person to, like, prevent a terrorist bomb from killing 1 million people, well, that seems obviously justified. And so whether or not... And so it seems like these acts are usually vile. But in cases where they're not vile, it seems like we don't have as much the intuition that they're really bad.
Yeah, and I think even for a critic, it'll often be the case that it would be too extreme to call it vile. It would seem like it's maybe being too cold, but it's not vile because you are trying to benefit people overall the most.
Right. I mean, utilitarianism involves caring about everyone equally and then maximizing the good things in people's lives. And so if you have a thing that's nominally bad, but maximizes the goodness of sentient beings' lives, it ceases to seem like a bad thing. You know, it seems like the reason why things are bad is because they're bad for beings, and so if they're good for beings overall, But let's see the specific counterexamples.
Generate the most good. What difference does it make what the action is? Well,
okay, base.
A good action, as the act utilitarian understands it, is that which promotes the most pleasure. Let's imagine 10 sadists to have captured an innocent person, and they are torturing him. What if the pleasure the 10 sadists are getting is outweighing the pain the one innocent person is getting? According to Bentham and Act Utilitarians, this is the right action to do. Right, I see.
Well, okay, but so I mean, I think that, you know, it's very easy to say, like, imagine if this bad thing, imagine if it was conducive to pleasure, then utilitarianism would justify it. But when you, like, start to think about the details, I mean, think about how bad it is to be tortured. And so, like, for the to outweigh, they would have to get this, like, fantastic amount of pleasure, more than, like, I mean, the badness of torture plausibly outweighs the pleasure that people experience in their life. They'd have to get, like, more than a lifetime's worth of of happiness from this. And then when we start to get scenarios where you're benefiting people by more than saving their life, by considerably more at the cost of torturing a person, just starts to seem so counterintuitive. And the reason why I think it does seem counterintuitive is I think a combination of overgeneralizing. So, we have this pattern that we recognize where torturing people is always bad. So then in the rare cases when the hypothetical cases when it's not bad, we extrapolate the pattern of it's bad to torture people rather than the pattern of it's bad to do things that are not conducive to overall pleasure. And then second of all, I think that it comes from, there's some term for it, like the halo effect, where if something is mostly bad, but there's a slight upside to it, we think that the upside isn't good. So we think of things as either wholly good or wholly bad. And so then we ignore the positive benefits of the pleasure. The other point is that I think that, so consider a case where people do get immense pleasure from, or where people do get pleasure from suffering of others in a way that's conducive to well-being. Well, one example that can be given is eating meat. Now, I don't think that eating meat is conducive to overall pleasure, but let's imagine that there was this just massive being that was the size of a planet. That if we killed it and ate it for meat, we could feed the entire world. Even if we had to torture it, that seems like it would be perfectly fine. And so, utilitarianism, I think, gets the correct result there.
Well, I feel like also in a lot of these cases, if you want to test whether the intuition is actually that utilitarianism is wrong, you first need to evaluate in the case whether it's intuitive that that's what utilitarianism says is right. And that would be enforced by imagining, if someone was the person who was going to be tortured and then they were going to live the lives of all the torturers back to back right afterwards, would it be best for that person's well-being, who's this combination of all the people, to be tortured? And then, intuitively, it seems kind of like that wouldn't be the case. And that's potentially part of the intuition that drives against these cases, which is really just saying that that's not what utilitarianism would say would be best.
Yeah. There's also a blog post that I read about this that I'll link in the chat. I think it's Contra Humor on Utilitarianism, Part 7. It wasn't about this very specific scenario, but it was sort of this broad general idea.
So it does nothing for the minorities. It only focuses on the majority. So
no, it cares about the majority and the minorities equally, as equally significant agents. But if the benefits to the majority outweigh the harms to, just because something benefits the minority, or benefits the majority rather, doesn't mean that it's approved of by utilitarianism. And the other thing is, let's say that you hold that sadistic pleasure is actively bad. Well, if you accept that bad things are commensurable, which I think you have to, otherwise you get crazy reductios on your view, then you would have the opposite weird conclusion, where if you say that sadistic pleasure is bad, then if there was enough sadistic pleasure that a person got from a torture, then the primary badness of the torture wouldn't actually be the torture. It would be the pleasure that the torturer got from the torture. But that seems really unintuitive.
Yeah.
Justice is irrelevant as it's only focusing on pleasure. Yes, I understand. Also, it's not very practical when faced with...
Wow. Our friend just got completely... he was so based at the beginning, and now
he understands now.
Yeah. And the claim that justice is irrelevant just begs the question against the claim that utilitarianism is just.
With quick moral choices, you don't have time to weigh up all the pleasure and pain involved and to all the people involved and use the hedonic calculus. So act utilitarianism doesn't seem like something you could accurately follow. Yeah.
Where to begin with this objection? Well, one point. So, they're clearly I think that if we consider how people make decisions in their ordinary life, they do it largely on, mostly I think on egoist lines, but like, I mean, whenever a person decides like what to eat, they're deciding what they think will make them happier generally, or like where to go to college. So it's clearly not impossible to apply. And if you look at the ways that utilitarians act, it's different in important ways from the way that non-utilitarians act. I mean, another point is that to be a utilitarian, you have to be a hedonist. Now, we're both hedonist utilitarians, but you could be a objectivist theorist like Richard Yedder Chapel, or a desire theorist. Now, you'd be wrong, but you're allowed to do that. But also, even if a theory is hard or possible to apply, that wouldn't affect its correctness. So, like, let's say that one's a deontologist. Like, imagine a world where it was really difficult to figure out it was like a really complicated situation such that we wouldn't know what the demands of deontology were. That would do nothing to show that deontology were not correct. The fact that X is hard to apply doesn't mean it's incorrect. And also, I think what we would expect out of the correct moral theory is for it to often be hard to apply. I mean, morality is difficult, in fact. So if a moral theory just gives us easy answers all the time, then it's not capturing the fundamentally salient features of the world.
Well, I guess it kind of hinges on whether the things that determine whether something is good are readily accessible to actors. But I think everyone would grant, most ethical theories would say the consequences matter, at least in some cases. So, in pretty much every ethical theory, there will be cases where it's very hard to determine what the right thing to do is. So that's not even something unique to utilitarianism, because there may be some bizarre, unpredictable consequences due to some action, and a person would still care about the consequences, even if they aren't sufficient to determine the right answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Also, we cannot ever truly know if an action will generate the greatest good for the greatest number. It is something that's...
But we can maximize expected utility. I mean, like, given that all plausible moral theories think that consequences matter at least some degree, if your moral theory, like if your objection just rule out caring about consequences at all, then that's a problem. We can also never know with certainty, in a similar sense, what any other moral theory would say. We can just make our best guesses.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what they mean by we can't know.
We can have no justified true beliefs about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but then that statement just comes out.
It's only in any case where we do have justified true belief about what the utilitarian correct action is, it's a Gettier case. So.
Yeah.
To predict. Let's use your moral dilemma of the people drowning. An act utilitarian would say to save the 2 people over the 1. But what if the 1 actually has the cure for cancer? And if he stays alive, he will save millions of other people from dying. Surely.
Well, it could turn out, like for any action you take, it could turn out that it was the wrong action. That does not mean that we can't have our best guesses of what the right action is. And I mean, yeah, it's just such a dumb objection.
Yeah. And so there can be a fact of the matter about what any rational person would have a justified belief about the right action in a given case. And it could diverge from what happens to be the right action in that case. And that's still fine.
Yeah.
Saving him would result in the greatest good. So again, it's very hard to know if our actions will generate the greatest good.
Well, act utilitarianism destroyed. Okay, that was video 1. Chris, do you still feel like you're an act utilitarian? Do you feel as though your act utilitarianism survived that barrage of deadly criticism?
It did not. I'm a rule utilitarian now. But I don't know what the rules are because I don't know anything about the consequences.
Yeah, true. All right, this one we'll watch at 2 times speed, I think. Wow, it was already
the main principle to which the utilitarians adhere, which is the principle of utility. And this principle says that actions are right insofar as they produce aggregate happiness and wrong insofar as they produce aggregate pain. And what I've tried to do is demonstrate that this theory is somewhat intuitive. I think we use it in many day-to-day kinds of decisions, very simple decisions sometimes, and even more serious decisions like what we've seen when we talk about how decisions are made when it comes to warfare. Sometimes we'll have to sacrifice a handful for the sake of the greater good. We've also seen how the utilitarians reason about a good number of more controversial issues, things such as the legalization of marijuana, or for instance, we talked about what utilitarians say about capital punishment, our duties to, our ethical obligations to animals, or our ethical obligations to help those who are suffering in dire conditions in third world countries. And I think the theory of utilitarianism, it does seem plausible to a good many people, and it's actually been a very important and influential theory in the last 100 plus years. In some sense, even before that, even before it had a name, you'll see philosophers and you'll see people make decisions on the basis of whether or not that decision is going to lead to greater overall.
Utilitarianism was around in like the times of like Bentham, Mill, and Sidgwick. It didn't like gain special prominence in the last century. What is he on?
Happiness or produce more overall pain. There's just something intuitive and right about this theory. Nonetheless, it does have some problems. And what we're going to do in this class is we're going to look at some of the bigger problems with utilitarianism. And what we're going to really be trying to do is push on the principle of utility and ask, what does this principle entail? What actions must it lead to and justify as morally right? I had said in the last class, or last couple classes, that the principle of utility, it doesn't square with every single moral belief that we happen to have. And that's okay, to a certain extent. If it lines up with our shared core morality, as long as it lines up with that, then it might very well be an acceptable theory. We'll have to look at some other things to judge in total, but at least it has to line up with those shared core moral beliefs. If it pushes our beliefs that are on the periphery a little bit, the ones we're not so certain about, collectively or individually, then the theory is not as problematic. But what we're going to see is that the principle of utility, when taken to its logical consequences, it doesn't seem to line up with our shared core morality. In fact, it seems like it's going to justify some things that appear to be very immoral to us. And so if it justifies things that appear to us to be quite immoral, then that seems to be a big strike against the theory of utilitarianism. So before we get to these examples where the theory of utilitarianism really seems to press against it.
Yeah, I really disagree with this notion. I think that we would expect our moral intuition, if we look at at how much moral disagreement there is and at the poor track record of our moral intuitions, we would expect our moral intuitions to be very wrong in some cases. Just pointing out one case where it's very morally wrong. That is zero evidence against utilitarianism. It's exactly what you would expect them to do.
Yeah, although I suppose if he's correct in saying that these are the core judgments and that there is some way to avoid being wrong, having unintuitive consequences in the core judgments, then I do think that would be a reason to disfavor utilitarianism. Because I mean, that's like a reason for disfavoring, some ethical theory that says it's always good to torture people.
Yeah, that's only if it depends on what is meant by core judgments. But if, yeah, we'll have to see.
A shared core morality. I want to remind you of an example we looked at.
Sully Sylvan, there are no good criticisms, okay? Also, although, there are, but none of them are in popularly accessible YouTube format. So, and going through Bernard Williams' book would be kind of boring. I also, for those who are interested, my blog's linked in the chat, and there I go over many good, in quotes, criticisms.
And hopefully you remember this from a few classes ago. We talked about the trolley car experiment. And in this experiment, just to remind you, basically what's going on is you have this trolley car.
Experiment?
Yeah, he's actually run this. He sees the trolley cars and ties people to the rails.
Dismantled. And if you do absolutely nothing, this trolley car is going to bear down on the track and kill these 5 innocent people. If you throw the switch here, however, it'll divert the path of the trolley car down this path. It'll save these 5, but it'll end up killing just this one person. And many people feel that the appropriate thing to do in this situation is to throw the switch. Why? Because it would produce less pain and suffering in the world. That seems to be certainly what a utilitarian would say. You kill the one, you save the 5. And so in this case, the theory of utilitarianism, it seems to line up with some intuitions that we oftentimes see people express or share. Now, not everybody always agrees with this thought experiment. I've encountered a number of people who would say they would do nothing and just allow the 5 to die. And that might be, to some people that sounds preposterous and crazy, but it really isn't. I can understand why somebody would say that, but what I've experienced is the vast majority of people, probably 80 to 90%, would say you throw the switch. And so here we see that utilitarianism does appear to align with what is our shared core moral beliefs. But I want you to put this in kind of the back of your mind for a second, and I want to share with you another thought experiment that's very similar to this one. So let's suppose that you go to the doctor's office just for a routine visit. You have to get your yearly checkup. And so you go to the doctor, and the doctor looks at you, and the doctor determines that you are in perfect health. The doctor says, you know what, you are a specimen of physical fitness. I've never seen anyone with the likes of you. You are just perfect health. And you say, well, that's fantastic, doc. I'm glad to hear that. The doctor didn't.
Okay, wait, I think I responded to this in a previous video. I responded to this video. But just to address briefly the organ harvest case, I mean, there's a lot to be said about it. I'll just link an article. I feel like I'm linking lots of articles, but but that's okay. Um, uh, uh, yeah. So I recently had a debate with Ben Burgess about the organ harvesting case. I think that the movie really reflected. It just becomes very obvious that you should kill the person and harvest their organs. Okay, now we get to the fun, bad criticisms of utilitarianism, the team ones.
Joining us, I am the co-owner of the Crucible, Pedro, and we have a high IQ show for you today that should result in the most utils.
Do you have a high IQ show? I really don't think so, unfortunately. 1.5 times speed.
Being wielded. Our official in-house left-wing debater, Synth, will be going up against internet personality, really artificial intelligence, T-Jump, covering the subject of truth utilitarianism. Pretty much Gary Casper.
More like artificial unintelligence.
For our first rule, game number 7. So everyone take notes, or you will get lost.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Crucible. Tonight we've got Tom Jump against Synth on the topic of truth utilitarianism. I'm going to bring out Tom first, let him introduce himself, tell you where you can find him and all of his great personal details that he wants out there, so that you guys can go like, subscribe, and all that good stuff.
Hey, how's it going?
Since truth utilitarianism is unfortunately crazy, it's like we should maximize like true beliefs. But I think Synth is now like an objectively utilitarian, which is good. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of this view. That is, yeah. It's very odd when you like. It seems like there wouldn't be really any good definition of a true belief in that theory, where then you don't have absurd, perfect worlds involving tons of arbitrary facts that people know.
T-Jump, that's where you can find me. Please give me all of your money. Thanks.
All of it, not just some of it. You heard it here first. Synth, how you doing tonight? It's good to see you.
How's it going? I'm Synth. I'm the left-wing in-house debater for the Crucible. I've got a YouTube channel as well at youtube.com/Synth, the way it's spelled on screen. But don't give me all your money. Spend it all in the Crucible. I think it's a really good platform. I'm glad there are platforms like this as opposed to the alternatives.
All right. Well, we sure appreciate that. We're going to start just for the audience, for those who are new or coming in tonight. We always allow for 7-minute opening statements. You don't have to take the entire 7 minutes if you don't want to. You can yield your time back. There's no penalty for doing it. You just have it available if you want to use it. We'll start with Synth, as he was the challenger in this. Synth, go ahead with your opening.
Sure. So my ethical system is a form of utilitarianism. The actions we ought to do are primarily the ones that maximize the degree to which people's brains are modeling reality as it exists independently of human minds. This experience is weighted on an individual level with something nearish a larger.
Okay, reductio to this view. You create infinite worlds full of torture, but in those infinite worlds full of torture, there's one guy with one true belief. Good or bad?
Truth is the highest form of utility, in my view. Things like fulfilling desires come second, and those are all a bunch of nerd words. But in simple terms, this means we should do things that allow people to better understand the world, and we need to put more concern to people who are worse off. What makes someone a good person is a spectrum based on intent to do good actions. You could say the pinnacle of morality is a person who attempts to do the most good for as many people as possible.
Oh wait, Matthew. There's an important point. If Synth theory is true, we would expect it to diverge from our intuitions in some cases. So the fact that you pointed out a single core judgment where he has an absurd consequence is not sufficient to rule out his theory.
Well, but there are lots of like similar judgments. I also think that
we could have an alternative theory that gets the right answer on that and doesn't get any worse answers than anything else. So we could have.
But the other point is that I think that what we would expect out of the correct moral theory is for it to be counterintuitive sometimes, but for it to when you really reflect on the cases, it begins to seem much more intuitive, and that's exactly what we see. When it comes to utilitarianism, unlike or the correct utilitarianism, unlike truth utilitarianism. Yeah, and there are like an infinite number of similar cases. So one of them is like you can like be waterboarded and like gain the sum total of knowledge on Wikipedia, but like be waterboarded to death. Should you do it? And in that case, it's like it's an intuition about what makes people well off, and I tend to trust those intuitions more than I don't fully trust them, but I generally trust intuitions about what would be good for you more than about what like complex state of affairs for which heuristics might be reliable.
Well, I suppose also, yeah, I guess if Synth is a utilitarian, he would probably want to say that he's saying he's just maximizing the sum well-being of everyone. And so then he's saying that a person's well-being is how many true things they know, because that would be even like more controversial.
Yeah, that is a crazy view. But since an objectivist, there's not, so it's okay.
Yeah, I suppose.
Here are a few examples of ways this works out in the real world. Imagine you gave someone an infinite supply of drugs, making them feel great, but they're always half passed out on the couch. If you're drugged out, you're incapable of broadening your horizons or better understanding the world. And so, even in the case that it makes somebody feel better, even if they feel better overall, it'd still be wrong to sell them drugs, or even worse, to sell them to children. Another one.
I mean, I think that if we whenever you play, I think that this notion that there are like some pleasures that don't actually make you well off, is false. And I think that, for this pleasure that, whenever a person plays video games, they're not like doing something like holy and sacred. It doesn't seem like video games make you poorly off. Similar things are true of I think that just the things that we take pleasure in are just really arbitrary. And I don't see a reason to privilege some pleasures over others. And I think that our intuitions about that case are just undermined by the fact that it's a drug, and we correctly have this pretty good heuristic, which is that drugs are bad, even when they produce short-term pleasure, they end up not being overall beneficial.
Yeah, and I think like a common applied case would be like giving someone pain medication when or maybe like for a surgery procedure, having them be awake during the procedure will enable them to believe true things. And let's say that they don't get deluded about anything, but alternatively, you could put them to sleep and then they wouldn't have any true beliefs, or give them some pain medication that puts them in a delirious state, but then they wouldn't experience any pain during the surgery. And
yeah, that's
it seems
true.
like that aligns quite well with what's good for the surgery patient.
Yeah. Also, there are just an infinite number of irrelevant facts that it seems like we could know, but the only ones that seem to contribute to well-being are the facts that are useful and potentially contribute positively to utility. So it seems like you would not be well off by knowing the number of mosquito bites that people had in the last hour, nor would you be well off just knowing an infinite number of random facts about alternative worlds in the multiverse that you'll never access or interact with.
If you see a child drowning in a lake, you can hop in and save that kid, and if that kid dies, they'll never be able to understand anything else about the world. So it's your moral duty to jump in. It would be wrong to just sit there. Others
save the child so that they can know things. If the child will have mostly false beliefs, kill the kid.
Decisions are bad as well. So, for example, causing someone suffering is generally wrong. If you're suffering, you're distracted, and thus you're incapable of understanding truth. Fulfilling somebody's preferences is very strongly generally good for many reasons. For example, it gets rid of those wants and allows people to better focus on the truth. T-Jump's alternative is a system which believes that despite the fact that the actions you should do are going to be very similar to the ones that I prescribe that you should do, the actions that are moral are going to be distinct from this. So,
T-Jump's moral theory doesn't have oughts, okay? It's still a moral theory, but there are no oughts.
Example in the case of the trolley problem. T-Jump thinks it's objectively immoral to kill one to save 5. I would assume T-Jump applies this thing as well. It's objectively immoral to kill one to save 1 billion, or to steal a penny to save the world even. All of these would be to T-Jump objectively immoral, but T-Jump says you should do it. That's the end of my opening statement. T-Jump, go ahead.
Okay, T-Jump, you're up.
Yeah, so my moral action is one that describes morality in terms of what a perfectly moral world would look like. So I describe morality as...
Wait, okay, so a couple of points. T-Jump's world view, which says that things are objectively immoral, but you should still do them. It's just bizarre. Generally what people mean by objectively immoral is that it's the type of thing that you shouldn't do.
Or objective morality as the best of all possible worlds. And what the moral system in that world would be is the perfect...
What does that even mean? I define objective morality as the best of all possible worlds. That's obviously not a correct definition. Someone says, I believe in objective morality. An error theorist can believe in a best of all possible worlds by their standards. Does he think that there's an objectively best of all possible worlds, but there are no facts about what you ought to do?
Yeah, I suppose that's probably his view. But but it's clear that morality needs to be action guiding.
That true utilitarianism doesn't entail the minimization of false beliefs. Okay, slander is wrong. I think that there's a fact of the matter about what pleasure is from one to see the research of, I think, Ken Barrage. So I think that there is something specific that pleasure is. It may be sort of hard to define. Doesn't mean that it can't be massive. Okay, so far the definition that we have of objective morality is the best of all possible worlds. Okay.
And it's an identity theory. Objective morality is identical to the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, though Vosh
Use that
refuted
as-
it thus because all you have to go do is cross the Mexican border. That's the Spanish version.
Comparing points to assess morality in our world and every other world. So we could ask for any action, if you want to know if it's objectively moral, would this action be moral or immoral in the best of all possible worlds? If it would be immoral in the best of all possible worlds, it's an immoral action. It would be moral in the best of all.
Wait.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
What? Yeah, no. So, I mean, many
So it's kinda-
actions happen in the best of all possible worlds. So, like, I mean, just take the action of. So, Cheecham thinks the best of all possible worlds has no involuntary impositions of will. Well, then an action where you prevent someone, like, there's a train that's going to hit 5 people, you can flip the switch and it'll hit no one. Well, that wouldn't happen in the best of all possible worlds. It would neither be moral or immoral. It would be impossible in the best of all possible worlds. There couldn't be any involuntary imposition of will. Or maybe that would be immoral, because if that were happening in the best of all possible worlds, and people would consent, and so it would be fine.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, T-Jump might somewhat endorse the interpretation of that makes it very hard to say what we should do in our world, since he seems to get conclusions like that.
Yeah. It's so ridiculous.
Possible world is a moral action. And so my morality takes the stance that we should define morality not based off of our subjective pragmatic limitations, but based off of the objective connotation of what morality would look like in the best of all possible worlds. This is what
Okay, he just says things like they make no sense, and then he'll just have a stream of like sentences where every sentence is nonsense in its own unique way, and he'll just string them together, just leaning back casually in his chair. And he'll just, I mean, it's incredible, you know. It's like he's just diving headfirst into a bucket of shit, and then is just with like, totally unabashed. Okay, so no, there's a different. The fact that there's a pragmatic limitation, that wouldn't mean that it's subjective. You could believe there's an objective fact of the matter about what we should, given our pragmatic limitations, do. Much like there's an objective fact of the matter, like there aren't only facts of the matter about things which are true in the best possible worlds. Like, you know, it's objectively the case that if I, with my, given my pragmatic limitations, I can't run a mile in 2 minutes. That's objectively the case.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no like relationship between being objective and pragmatism.
why I use the terms in the way.
Well, and he also needs to define what it would mean for something to be immoral in the best of all possible worlds, because presumably, if you wanted to know that, you would look to his morality, and then there would be a circular definition.
He thinks that in the best of all possible worlds, nothing could be immoral because no one could have involuntary impositions of will. So then nothing's. If Cheecham's morality is true, then everything is permitted.
Yeah.
Described, and I think it is a better, more accurate way to use them rather than define them subjectively, because if we do define them subjectively, it leads to contradictions with how morality would be perceived in the future. So, for example, if you say, is it moral in the trolley problem to kill 1 to save 5? The answer is yes, given our current limitations. But if we apply the limitations of the future or future technological advances, then the answer is going to be no. So these.
Okay, so but if you say, is it moral to kill 1 to save 5 in the trolley problem, what you're asking about is specifically in the trolley problem where it's killing 1 to save 5, not where we have some futuristic technology to save it. And so there's no contradiction between holding the phrase, should you kill 1 to save 5 in the trolley problem, it's indexed for current level of technology. But if we had magic technology that mooted the problem, then you should save all 6.
Yeah. Well, and typically, yeah, you would define like a reason for action, like Scanlon's definition is like P is a reason for X to do or hold to take action A or hold attitude A in circumstances C. And so then, so T-Jump seems to not be thinking that that's exactly what a reason or a moral obligation is. Which obviously it seems like you have an answer depending on circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, how do you respond to this opening statement in debate? It's where every sentence is false. Like, how do you address all of them?
pragmatic limitations that are used in the utilitarian model have the problem of not being able to accurately assess future morality, as it is completely deterministic on our subjective limitations, whereas mine takes a more holistic.
Well, no. So what you should do is index to the specific scenario. So if you change the scenario, then you'll get a different judgment.
Approach, and is able to define morality from the scope of any possible world or any technological development, and accurately give it a definition that can be applied in all of these different worlds, including the best moral ones. And that is what the better model.
But utilitarianism obviously can do that also. It says that in all possible worlds, so that's what
There. The floor is open. Synth, if you want to start with a response, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. So you said it would be moral given our current limitations. Our current limitations are true, so deductively would that just mean it is moral?
No, it would fit our current limitations as defined as moral, would only apply in our current social perspective. There's no objective reference there. You couldn't say because we would define it as moral in our current society, therefore it's objectively moral. No, what you could say is that we will.
Okay, but if it's what is he saying? If it's objectively immoral given our current limitations, then the claim, if the claim is asking about what given our limitations we should do, then it would be the case that it's objectively moral.
Will give it that label, or most people in our society would give it that label. But the reason it fails is because if we look at the society like the best of all possible worlds I described, most people in that society would say you're all wrong, and they're more likely to be right than we are because they're in the best of all possible worlds. They're more likely to have some model of morality that is more likely to correspond.
Okay, wait. So now it's right. So now we're like consulting the people in the best of all possible worlds to figure out what they think.
Yeah.
They're more likely to be right than us. Well, okay. I mean, I would agree that like epistemically, maybe the best of all possible worlds would have people who are more likely to be right about morality than our world. But that it's not right because it would be judged to be right in the best of all possible worlds. If anything, it would be judged to be right because it is in fact right. So that's just providing a way to know about morality. That's not providing the ontological foundation for morality. But also, by the standard, this doesn't get rid of any objective morality, because if it were the case that in the best of all possible worlds, that they thought that in the best of all possible worlds, if it were the case that they thought that in our current world you should kill one to save five, well then by this it would be objectively the case that you should kill one to save five.
Yeah, I think the way he's framing it ontologically is kind of like a subjectivist, where you would say what you have reason to do is what a fully informed version of you would say you should do. And then and that's what gives you the reason to do it. But really we want to say that facts about the thing that's happening are what give you a moral reason to not engage in some behavior. And that perhaps you could find out by finding out what a fully informed version of you would suggest. But it's not yet. It's not what grounds.
Responds to what the better or the actual morality is. And since they're most likely going to say, no, you guys are all wrong for calling that morality, then we're more likely to be incorrect about giving it that label, even though we would pragmatically do so given our limitations.
When you say possible, are you referring to logically possible?
Wait, okay, we would pragmatically give it a label. But then this is just begging the question, because the utilitarian will obviously think that in the best of all possible worlds, the people will say that you should do the utilitarian thing in all possible worlds. The thing that the best possible world makes people correct about morality. It's like every sentence is wrong, just in a new and baffling way. So it's hard to argue against, because it's just this new shocking error that you didn't expect, combined with steadfast confidence.
Possible, or are you referring to some other idea of possible?
What do you mean?
When you say the best. You said the best of all possible worlds. When you say possible here, what do you mean?
Modal realism. If we assessed all possible.
He's a modal realist.
Wait.
There are various possible worlds that actually exist, and the best one is the one that exists.
So Synth asked what modality is being talked about. And T-Gem said modal realism, all the possible worlds. Which, well, for one, T-Gem is not a modal realist, I'm pretty sure. He's just throwing out a buzzword that he knows. But he is using it wrong, given that modal realism is parasitic on some prior notion of modality, right? Oh, this is so.
There is, it doesn't matter if it's modal ontological realism where they all exist or not. If we look at a world which is.
Oh, now it doesn't matter if it's modal ontological. So it doesn't matter if modal.
Oh, wait, I'm going to be right back.
Okay. Well, this is an excellent expression on T-Gem's page. Yeah, but then this just is a wildly implausible account of what we mean by moral terms. I mean, people like not every people don't all think that that being moral is like people who are competent users of the English language disagree with T. Jump's moral theory, which means that it can't just be true trivially by definition. Yeah. Okay. This was intended to be addressing bad criticisms of utilitarianism, but now this is just an attack T. Jump stream, it seems. The thing is, like, the correct morality has to be true in all possible worlds, not just the best of all possible worlds. Yeah, Sully Sullivan says when he says pragmatic limitations, he means material resources, basically. But, like, the material resources obviously don't affect what the correct moral theory, like, what the correct, so they affect what you should do practically. They don't affect what the correct moral view is. So the counterfactual claim would still, like, about, like, if X maximizes well-being, you should do it, still be true. In all possible ways. I have a Patreon. The link to it's in the chat, so if people want to donate, that would be much appreciated. And would establish good incentives to make more videos. Yeah. This is just such a glorious frame to be stuck on. I like the title. Debater goes unhinged since utilitarianism versus T. Jump's ethics. But I mean, it's not even clear, like, really what T. Jump is saying. I know that T. Jump denies that there are facts about what you ought to do, though he believes in reasons. But I just take it to be the case that what you ought to do is what you have most reason to do, given that reasons count in favor of whatever there are reasons for. And so, would T. Jump deny that account? It's not really clear. Does anyone in the chat have any questions? I'm running out of things to say rapidly. T. Jump, to be clear, does go unhinged. Okay, true. Yeah, I've seen this debate before. What's up, Synth? Synth, did you hear the previous total annihilation of your truth utilitarianism, where it was beaten into the ground with facts and logic?
All right, I'm back.
Whoa. Look who decided to return after an hour. Hi. Oh, hey, what's up, Rebecca? From Bread of Life. Okay.
The most technologically advanced possible and try to discern what is the morality they would have, or how would they answer this question. That's what I mean by possible here.
In the best.
But then this is some, like, weird, watered down ideal observer theory. It's like with the best of all possible worlds people do. But also, the best of all possible worlds is clearly a normative notion. So it requires some. So, like, it's not true in virtue of it being what people would do in the best of all possible worlds. Yeah. Wow. Since sneakily evaded my critiques.
Best of all possible worlds are the infinite people, feeling like infinite amounts of good.
There could be.
Is it possible?
Sure.
Okay, then it would be the best of all possible worlds. Would be one with infinite people experiencing infinite amounts of good.
No,
If
no,
this
no,
is
so
the case,
I
then the
would
best of all
define-
possible.
no,
in the best.
no.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't know you.
So the best of all possible worlds, by my definition, is one where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. The number of people there isn't really relevant as long as it's more than like one.
Okay, so this is a
Okay, so if there was only
odd.
one person, you think this would be the best possible?
Wait. Okay. Wow, there's a lot there. So one, this is a bizarre view of population ethics that holds that, like, well, I mean, this would seem to entail anti-natalism, right? Like, if like making a person with a perfect life is like once there's already one person, that's like a weird like person affecting view, morally neutral. Making people with crappy lives or like with like mediocre lives where there are a bunch of involuntary impositions will seem to be bad. So that's a weird view of population ethics. There was some other thing that he said. Wait, I'm gonna roll back real quick.
I suppose that this could be characterized as somewhat like rule utilitarianism, where it's like what's right is to live by the rules, but not the rules that would make our world go best, but the rules that are instituted in this specific world. And then the specific world is some world that he specifies and then calls the best possible world.
Worlds, by my definition, is one where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. The number of people there isn't really relevant as long as it's more than like one.
Oh, wait, okay, so the best possible world is one where you can't force anyone to do anything. Okay, but I mean, it seems like that seems to like be not the best possible world. So like consider people who want to who want to like make a promise that they're bound to. Well, the promise will involuntarily impose on their will, but that doesn't mean that like no one be able to make promises in the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, well, I think isn't he has this like utopia view, the best of all possible worlds. You have such infinite resources that there's no point to making promises because you don't need anything from anyone because you have unlimited resources.
Okay,
and
but
then
what
you
about
also
like
can't impose anything on anyone because the resources to stop imposing are much more powerful than the resources to impose, which is obviously somewhat unrealistic.
what about when people voluntarily choose to have involuntary impositions of will? So like, let's say that someone consents to like do a boxing match, but they so you know after they've been like it seems like they're gonna lose.
Well,
they wouldn't voluntarily like want the boxing match to continue. They previously agreed to have a complete boxing match. Would that not count? I mean, there just seem like weird. Like
you have
to
think about like over time. And yeah, so he could go both ways on that. He could either say, if at any moment the person's will in that moment is violated, that's not okay, or what's right at a given moment in time ignores what the future people will want. And I guess he probably doesn't have an answer to that.
Yeah. I at one point argued with T-Jump in some Q&A about population ethics, and T-Jump just said contradictory things.
Yeah. Well, I think, it seems like he's not really participating in the debate if he doesn't have a theory of morality that tells you what the right thing to do is in certain circumstances.
Yep.
Okay, so if there was only one person, you think this would be the best possible world?
More than one. Number of people don't matter here. So again, we're talking about the laws of the universe, not the number of people here. It's irrelevant.
So for you, the best possible world would be one.
We're talking about the laws of the universe? What laws of the universe? What are there? I mean, I know
Morality
T-Jump thinks that morality is a law of physics, like pulls on our brain in total contravention of the standard model and of any mechanism that we understand. It would also pull on aliens' brains in similar ways, in a way that's believed by no moral naturalists. But what?
In which it just seems like if you're saying best, you're referring to this in some kind of like, I guess, normative sense, or are you like, I'm not?
No, it's just a label I'm giving to a world that is the most technologically advanced. So imagine if there's a world where there's...
Wait, best is just the most technologically advanced, so it's not known involuntary impositions of will?
I think, he has a view that there's some convergence, that it so happens that the most technologically advanced world will necessarily, as a result, have certain properties that make it the best possible world. One of those being no involuntary restrictions of will.
Well, what a happy coincidence.
But then I think this is also a little weird to say because typically possible worlds span an entire temporal order. And so then if he thinks that we're moving towards maximum technologically advanced, then in some sense we're in the best possible world. Whereas it seems like he wants to say a possible world is a slice in time and space, as opposed to all of, I guess, a slice in time over all space, as opposed to all time and all space.
Yeah.
The most technologically advanced world possible. Just imagine the same number of people as ours, because it doesn't matter for the sake of the argument. What is, if we had all of the technology to do absolutely everything, there's no limitations on food or resources or money, what is the moral system they would have? We're going to label this the best. We're just going to call this the best. Because
Okay, so it could exist with one person.
It doesn't matter. This is irrelevant to the argument.
Well, no, it is relevant to the argument
This makes
I'm
no
about to make.
difference
Just because
to
you don't see the
morality.
relevance. Just because you don't see the relevance.
No difference.
But it is relevant to the argument of whether the best possible world will have more than one person.
To morality.
Sure, if it doesn't matter, then the best of all possible worlds, right? One where nobody else is able to violate anybody else's consent would be one where like either one person exists or one where more people exist.
This is irrelevant.
It's not a straw man. Hold on. Hold on. I let you go for a bit. No. You just said that it could be possible with the case of one person.
Hang on, guys. Hang on. We got to do one at a time. Let Synth get his response and
Okay, one point is that Andrew is a really good moderator. I mean, Andrew has crazy political views. He's like a radical right winger, but he's a nice guy and he's a good moderator.
Get right back to you, T. John.
Sure. So if it's the case that in a world where the best possible world would be any world in which there exists there exists nobody ever violating anyone else's consent, this would be the case for a world in which one person exists. Nobody could violate anybody else's consent because only one person exists, and thus to create the best of all possible worlds, you should kill off all but one person. This is ridiculous.
No. Again, as I said, this is a straw man. He's wasting time. He doesn't understand anything about the issue. So we're comparing models. Your mind says
the straw man wasting time doesn't understand the issues.
No involuntary imposition of will. It means if you kill anybody, it's immoral. No, that isn't the best of all possible worlds. You don't get to kill people in the past and call it a moral world. That's just stupid. Literally a stupid argument. So to get back,
you don't get to kill.
And so I suppose his view be that the best possible world is one where, in all time, society's been maximally technologically advanced, and so that at no point in time there's been an involuntary restriction of will.
Yeah, it's then there's no fact of the matter of. It's such a strange view. Like, is there no fact of the matter about whether you should like bring about the best of all possible worlds? Like, it can't be the best of all possible worlds given that it's like have past exist.
Yeah, the problem. We act only in time. But so you could maybe say you need to make it so that the possible world you're in is closer to the best of all possible worlds, and you can make it, and that if the past is the same but the future becomes closer to the best of all possible worlds future, then your world would overall be closer.
But he doesn't believe in aughts. So how can it be that your aughts are almost closer to the best of all possible worlds?
Yeah.
back to the point which he completely just evaded on this complete random side tangent that had nothing to do with the issue. The question is which model of morality is better? His model uses a subjective contextual definition of morality based.
Why is he treating the subjective and contextual as synonyms? They're not. I mean, claim I can't. The mile claim. I can't run a mile in a minute. Well, earlier I said 2 minutes. I can't run a mile in either a minute or 2 minutes. That's not subjective. That's objective, in that it's true in a way that's mind independent.
It's on only our current limitations. My model uses a definition that if we imagine the best world possible, which is one where imagine we got to the point where we had infinite technology and no limitations, what model of morality would they use? The number of people here is just a stupid titanium that's irrelevant. Imagine the same number we have now, whatever we would have when we had perfect technology. Doesn't matter to the point. The point is what is the moral system we're going to use when we get to a point where we have the best technology possible? No more limitations.
Yeah, I really think this is circular.
Doesn't care about population.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant to the point and stupid.
Yeah, I think he has a revisionary view of morality where he doesn't think it's about guiding actions in all possible circumstances. And then I think it's maybe okay to have a revisionary definition. You can defend it, but what's weird is to be confused by someone who uses the standard definition that it's about how to guide actions in all possible circumstances. And T-Jump just seems confused by that idea.
This is a funny shot.
Limitations of food, no more limitations of money. What moral system will we adopt? In that moral...
Isn't that contingent? Seems like if we... I mean, it seems like it would just depend on the agents. I mean, I think that if you say that they're perfectly rational... Okay. Other funny...
Michael Smith moment.
Yeah.
But he's
so, I mean, I think that,
subjectivist.
yeah.
System. How will they answer the question? That answer is more likely to give us a definition of morality that is going to correspond to.
It's more likely to give us a definition. What? But I mean, words usage is not determined by how they would be used in the best of all possible worlds. Maybe the best of all possible worlds would use like the most like efficient semantic language, and so would like have like water not refer to H2O. That doesn't mean that water isn't H2O and that we need to use their definition. It's so insane.
To the true morality, or what we should call objective morality, whether or not there is such a thing. And that system is the one I'm using to give a definition. So that system, which can accurately define morality at all points in time through all history for all possible worlds, is a better system to define morality than one that is contingent on our subjective limitations, which is the one Synth is using.
No. Our moral, the one Synth is using, holds views about what we should do in all possible worlds.
So, T-Jump, there's actually a contradiction in your response. So the best of all possible worlds wouldn't be one in which people have been murdered, and then you went on to say the best of all possible worlds would be one in which we've developed technology that's as maximally good as it could be. This is a contradiction because people have been murdered. So you can, yeah, it is a contradiction. The best of all possible worlds is one where people haven't been murdered, and also the best of all possible world is this one, right?
Well, that doesn't address anything about the issue. No, it's not a contradiction.
That would be a contradiction.
No, it's not. So again, trying to get to the best of all possible worlds, given our limitations. The best of all possible worlds is just a philosophical world where there was never any involuntary position rule ever, no matter what. Obviously, we can never get there. We can't fix the things in time, but we can try to get as close as possible. And this is completely irrelevant to anything in the topic. So being pedantic about whether or not we can literally being pedantic. No. Me giving a thought experiment. Me giving a thought experiment of us trying to get there so that your tiny brain can understand the concept of the word is not the argument itself. So the best of all possible worlds is there's never impossible.
Your tiny brain cannot comprehend the best of all possible worlds. Sounds like a supervillain.
To have any at any points in time. That's the best of all possible worlds. Obviously, we can never get there, which I have stated in many previous debates. If you have ever watched any of my content, clearly you haven't. So that it would not be a contradiction.
That's fair for T-Jump. He has resolved one of the questions we had.
If you're saying you misuse the terms or something, that's what the
I did not misuse the terms.
I think it's fine. I'm not going to hold you to it. You can walk it back because now there's another issue.
I did not walk it back. Right? You made a mistake.
If you're saying that we should try to achieve the best of all possible worlds,
I was not saying we should try to achieve.
The posturing is so funny.
You did. Maybe you didn't mean to say it.
No. Again, I'll explain this to you again.
Go ahead. Let's do the next
the best of all possible worlds. The way to explain this is imagine if humanity got to a point where we had infinite technology and there were no resources. This is a way for you to imagine what the best of all possible worlds is like. This is not the best of all possible worlds. This is a way for you to imagine the best of all possible worlds.
What's the best of all possible worlds?
So the way to imagine is just think about a world that isn't the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, the way to imagine a fire truck. Think about a mannequin that's painted like a fire truck. This isn't a fire truck. This is a way to help you imagine a fire truck.
Yeah.
An example to try and get you to imagine what the word best of all possible worlds means. That's it. That's all.
So what does it truly mean then, since this clearly isn't what it means?
As I said before, it is a world where there is impossible to have any involuntary imposition of will, which means it is impossible for anyone to force anyone else to do anything they don't consent to. That is what the world would be.
A world in which it's impossible for anyone else to do anything that anyone else doesn't want, or it's impossible for one person to force another person to do things, would be one in which only one person exists. This is for this definition.
No. Again, if we include the people that exist now, that would not happen. Wrong. So again, that's irrelevant to the debate.
If only one person had ever existed, that would be the best of all possible worlds.
This is irrelevant to the debate. Again, what we're debating here is what is the...
It's not irrelevant to the debate. It's reductive to your view. If your view holds that the best of all possible worlds, there's only one person existing. And then that's
well, I think they need to clear up an ambiguity that clearly his definition is such that there would be multiple worlds that are equally best. Because you can have multiple worlds, that are different, but in which all of them, in both of the worlds, have no involuntary restrictions of will. But so then we can say, by your definition, one of the best possible worlds would be one in which nobody exists, because there is no involuntary restriction of will in a world in which nobody ever exists.
Yeah.
What is the better usage of morality? Which is the better model?
It's very relevant to it. This is part of your model.
No, it's not. This is not a part of my model.
The best of all possible worlds is part of your model.
No, it's not. Again, you've clearly never watched.
Wait, the best of all possible worlds isn't part of his model? Wow.
The best of all possible worlds is part of your model. You said it yourself.
Yes, the best of all possible worlds is, and one where you kill everyone is not the best of all possible worlds, because guess what? Those are impositions of will. So what you're saying is literally stupid. So can we get back to the actual debate?
So it's literally stupid, as opposed to figuratively stupid.
It seems like a more sophisticated version of what would be like. we can't move ourselves closer to the world in which nobody exists, because that would involve involuntary restrictions of will. But I mean, I don't think this argument would work, because it would seem like also that's even the case in trying to move our world closer to the world in which we're very technologically advanced. Because in order to get there, we're going to have to kill people in wars and various things. So, but it's quite odd.
Part of your moral system is best of all possible worlds. It being moral there would make it moral everywhere, right?
No,
so if this,
wrong.
Yeah,
that's so stupid. That's so
this is
stupid.
direct quote.
Wait, that's what he said earlier. What?
The moral the best
I
possible
said
world is the
yours
objectively
dumb.
moral.
I said your theory is
Tom,
this
is absolutely something you've said. The moral in the best possible world is the objectively moral. If it's moral there, it's moral anywhere.
No, it's not. That's stupid.
That is verbatim what you said.
That is in fact verbatim what he said.
No. If it was objectively moral in a perfect world, that doesn't mean it'd be moral here. No.
Okay, I agree with T-Jump now. Yes, the fact that it's good in the best of all possible worlds doesn't mean that it's good here. But
it's weird. It seems so like he doesn't think morality is a property that spans multiple possible worlds. Whereas typically we would think that morality is a single property that can be obtained in multiple possible worlds.
Yeah.
Again,
wait.
what you're saying is so insanely stupid right now. Stop.
No, I'm quoting you. That's why it's stupid. I agree.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
You said verbatim.
No, I mean, sentence right.
The morals in the best possible world is the objective moral.
You need to actually go back to the topic. Like,
we're getting hung up
about semantics that literally mean nothing to the topic. Stop being a dumbass and actually bring up like an actual.
I don't know why you're so I don't know why you're so tilted by this. I think it's completely fine to compare your model to mine.
People bringing up pedantic dumbass semantics that have nothing to do with the topic always.
Sure, I'll go on the defense. You can go ahead and challenge my system.
I did at the very beginning. I said, okay, so my model gives a comprehensive definition of morality based on all possible worlds, and it says that the better way to define objective morality is based on the best possible world, which we're going to define as just imagine we get to the best, technologically best world. Would that be a better way?
Wait, but he said that that's not the best of all possible worlds. That's just a way to help. That's just his way of painting a mental picture for explaining what the best of all possible worlds is like.
Yeah.
To assess morality rather than the subjective way our particular world does.
So in the case of understanding morality, I think it's just as objective to assess it based on what is good in this possible world, the one that we currently exist in, versus having all of these different ideas of different possible worlds that you seem to not be willing to defend. In the case of this world that actually exists, it seems it's the only one that does exist, and thus it's the one that's possible. My morality is relative to this one. I don't see that as unobjective. Just because the Empire State Building has a certain height in this possible world doesn't mean that it's not objective.
Yes, so if our world, if we assess morality contingent to us, that's literally subjective.
No. Wait, when he says contingent to us.
But he's doing that himself. He's saying the morality is contingent to different possible worlds as well. He says what's moral here is contingent. What's moral in the best possible worlds is a different thing.
Yeah.
If it's objective, it means we're assessing morality to all of the possible spaces.
I wouldn't be. No, objective and subjective are usually mind-independent, mind-dependent. Maybe you just use a different definition of objective and subjective.
Wait, Chris, remember when TJ claimed that the reason why it's bad, why you get to, the reason why there's a morally relevant difference between pushing the guy off the bridge and flipping the switch is because pushing the guy adds an extra involuntary imposition of will.
The shove.
Yeah.
So if you could somehow get them down there without doing a shove, if you could just, because they want to be in that geospatial location. It is true that you have the same involuntary imposition where you cause a trolley to run over them, but you also make them be in a different location than they would prefer to be in. So that's a very serious slight that transitions an act from right to wrong.
Right, and and by the standard, if you flip the switch in the trolley problem, but then also had to just shove some other random guy, then you had to shove a guy to push him into the switch to get him to flip the switch, then that would be immoral.
Yeah. You would have to.
So insane.
Well, if you're saying we have the objective morality in our world, but they don't in their world, or you're saying we have the objective morality in our world.
It's true in all the worlds, but it just
and they
has different verdicts that it delivers depending on the possible world.
They have the objective.
In some worlds, in all worlds, there's a fact of the matter about the height of the Empire State Building, if it exists. But the height of it may differ based on the possible world.
Morality in their world, but
I'm not saying there's a fact of the matter about the height.
Different.
I don't mean that there's a fact of the matter about whether something is the Empire State Building.
That would be a contradiction.
Yeah.
So in our world, like I say, like it's objective for me. It's objectively moral for me to do X thing, but it wouldn't be objectively moral for you to do X thing because you're a different person in a different situation. For example, it would be moral for me to give to charity if I have lots of money, but it wouldn't be moral for me to give to charity if I lived in Africa and I was about to starve to death. The most moral thing to do would be to preserve my own life. So you can have different things that are contextually different, and they can still be objectively the moral thing to do. For example, it's objective that you are a certain height. It's objective that I'm a certain height. We have different heights, but that doesn't mean it's subjective. We just have different heights. Objectively, you're 6'2", I'm 5'11".
Right. So that's why I gave in the trolley problem in our world.
Sensitive when giving T-Jump's height had it be really short. Like you're 5'3", I'm like 5'11".
You're a tiny gnome.
You're 2'1". I'm 6'10".
To flip the switch in the best of all possible worlds, they'd say it's not moral to flip the switch. So it's the same exact example. So if the same exact example, it seems moral to.
No, it's not the same exact example. If you make the situation different, they have magic flying technology that makes the trolley not a problem. It's not the same.
This world and is not seem moral to that world, and you're saying both are objective. That is a contradiction.
In the case of the trolley problem, you have two options. You either allow one person to die, or you allow 5 people to die. Some people do an action and action distinction. But if this is the case in the best of all possible worlds, I don't see why it would be moral to let 5 people die.
We're going back to the point. So if two worlds, doesn't matter whether you think they would agree or not, if they disagree on this one example, and you're saying both are objective, have you been there? Stupid thing.
You haven't. You're making
you never said I did. Stop.
We have to visit the best of all possible worlds before we can know anything about what they would say in the best of all possible worlds. And T-Jump is a visitor from the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, and that explains a lot. It explains why Jump thinks that we should defer to the people in the best of all possible worlds. It's like, look, defer to my people from the best of all possible worlds.
I wonder what he would think. There's an echo, by the way.
Oh.
But I wonder, do you think about the moral twin Earth? Because it seems like, in the
is it better now?
Yes. Or wait, let me see. Yeah, there's no echo now.
Great.
Stop stuck on the semantics. Focus on the point. Try to focus here. So if two worlds, two different locations, disagree.
Oh wait, did this screenshot?
No, this audio is different.
Okay, wait. Oh.
It's like more quiet now.
Okay. Yeah, so there was something weird with the audio. God, T-Jump just contradicts himself so frequently. It's hilarious.
Calling them both objective, that's a contradiction, right?
No, it would be if they disagreed on the same thing. It would be a contradiction. They don't disagree on the same thing. They don't disagree on the same thing.
Disagree on the same thing. Would that be a contradiction?
Yeah, they don't.
But that also wouldn't be a contradiction. Just because worlds disagree, that doesn't mean that they're. I mean, unless what you mean by worlds disagree is that in the same situation, that there's no fact of the matter about what you should do. But then they couldn't be the same thing if they're surrounded by different worlds. Worlds are different.
The best of all worlds haven't been discovered. You can't say they don't.
It is echoing, by the way, for me.
Oh, damn. Wait, okay, I'll try putting in headphones again. Let's see. How about now? Say something?
Well, it's only what the video is echoing, not my voice. At least, so currently my voice is not echoing. Earlier, the video was echoing.
I'll try playing the video again. Let's see if it's fixed.
Now it's silent. The video is silent. It's kind of humorous seeing them with no audio.
Okay. Would there be audio in the best of all possible worlds?
You claimed our morality.
Okay, it's back to normal.
World, right?
The moral system is, it's mind independent, yeah.
Right. So our model is morality. And if there's a different world and their model is objective and they disagree, that's a contradiction.
If they
You can't-
disagree on the same thing, it would be a contradiction.
When I say
right?
disagree,
We have no reason to
literally
believe
the same
this.
thing. Principle of charity. Use basic logic here. So if there are two worlds and they disagree on the same thing, then they both can't be objective because they're different things. They're contradictory, right?
So if they disagree on the same thing, yes,
Yes.
it would be a contradiction.
So if you're
Yeah, and the trolley problem is the same. It is exactly the same whether or not you have magic tech that makes the plane leap over like the people to save everyone.
Yeah.
defining
They contradict each
objective
other.
Wow, Christopher Green finally found a channel in favor of utilitarianism. True. I've done a bunch of debates about utilitarianism, which you also in my blog.
So if you're defining objective morality based on
about
our subjective
utilitarianism.
world and thinking that no one in any history in any future is going to disagree, that seems stupid.
Disagreement doesn't mean it's not objective. Presumably,
Yeah.
people will in the future have the wrong objective, the wrong view.
The better way to do it is to say, what is morality going to look like if we gained all the technology in the world? So there's no more subjective limitations, because there's lots of things that we think are moral because of our
Sometimes using subjective as a synonym for like pragmatic, which is strange.
subjective limitations that aren't, like stealing food. If 10 people are starving to death, there's not only enough food for 5 people and you steal it to save yourself, technically not immoral. But in other worlds, they say, no, that's still immoral. Like, the moral thing to do is to sacrifice yourself under all circumstances, no matter what, even if everyone is going to die. The morality changes as we gain more technology and more intellectual resources. And so to think that because of our subjective current world,
Our conception of morality changes as we gain technology, but morality doesn't change as we gain more technology.
Yeah, the moral particle pulling on our brain gets different as we get
Yeah.
more tech.
with us in the future about the morality that we subjectively see is a very weak-minded way to assess morality. A better way to assess morality is to
We're only like 20 minutes. We're only like 20 minutes in, and yet like every sentence he says something new that's dumb that we have to like address.
think,
Yeah.
what are they going to see as moral in the future when they have all the technology? That would be a better way to assess. This is more likely to be objective, and ours is more likely to be subjective.
But then it's not the ontological foundation for it being objective. Like, I mean, he's now just going back to a claim that like what we would morally believe in 100,000 years is more likely to be correct if we have like perfect tech, and I'd agree with that. Like,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
the debate is about what we would in fact believe.
Based off our limitations.
So, Tom, this is just not the argument I gave you. In the case of these two different disagreements you're talking about here, you've just made the claim they would disagree on this thing. In a different situation, different things are moral and immoral. It's not a disagreement about the same situation.
No. I said same. Remember, like 10 times I said same situation.
That's the
Same
whole
situation.
possible world where people are starving, or people are likely to die of starvation.
No.
That was
Again,
your example.
so, trolley problem. The example before was trolley problem. So trolley problem, we're talking about just the trolley problem. There are cases where we look at a moral situation, and in our world it seems moral, and in the future they may not see it as moral. Whether or not they do or not is irrelevant. They may not see it as moral. So
Well,
if we are
I was emulating Synth for a moment.
assessing objective morality based on our subjective world and say that our subjective world is right about everything and nothing will change, that's stupid. Clearly, a better way to try to assess objective morality is to think, what will it be like in the future when they don't have any subjective limitations like food stuff? That's why I gave the food example. So we imagine
Tom,
that isn't a problem.
The issue is you're saying they may not see it as moral. You are making it based on a subjective statement, right? In the case of they may not see it as moral. I agree, but they would be wrong about this, right? We can have objective morality that people can be wrong about. There are people who would disagree about.
Okay.
There will be people who would disagree with you about morality, Tom.
How
and
is this
you-
confusing to teach him? This
right?
is just
Morality is
the
objective.
standard view of morality. If you're gonna have a revisionary view of morality, you should understand the standard view of morality, and not be confused by it when someone says, "Well, here's the standard view of objective morality."
Yeah, no, I mean,
It's so confusing.
I don't know if he's confused or if he's like pretending to be confused or if he's pretending to be like frustrated.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
I feel like a weird
The
Gasper
reason-
thing, but
the
you're
reason-
hold on. You talked for a while there. I want to address all the
No,
issues.
you brought up a good point. You brought up a good point.
You just
Hang
got
on,
that
let him
bunch.
finish, Tom.
Okay, Tom.
Oh, no, he brought up a really good point there, so I wanted to bring it up. Yes, they could think of differently, but the question here is, who is more likely to be right? Are we more likely to be right about objective morality, or are the people who have discovered all the technologies and solved food and hunger and money, are they more likely to be right about morality?
So, are they more likely to? It doesn't really matter because we don't know if they are or aren't. If they are or aren't making a certain statement about it, they may disagree with us. But if you define morality a certain way, then it would be objectively the case that that is what morality is. Even if your definition is subjective, you hold the same position. You said it's technically not immoral. So even you believe that in this world it's not immoral to pull that lever.
Yeah, I do believe it, because I believe morality is based on that world. So, but what I
So
think,
it's technically not immoral.
no, it's still immoral. Justified immoral actions are
Okay,
still immoral.
I'll let
But
you walk it back.
I didn't walk it back. Like, have you seen nothing that's immorality? Maybe you should
I mean,
not be ignorant about the
I
topic. So,
have. You just like
I want
you
to go back to
you
the
did
debate. Let's
say
go
it
back-
would technically
let's go
not
back
be
to the
immoral.
debate.
Maybe you misspoke. I'm not going to hold you to
It
it.
would still be immoral. A justified immoral action.
T-Jump needs to write a philosophy paper. That would be hilarious.
Yeah. I think it is fine to say, yeah, we would expect, the future. I guess you were agreeing with this a little bit ago, but yeah, we would expect future people to be more correct about morality. But then TJ seems to be a bit weird where he says, okay, because of that, then my epistemology will be trying to predict what future people will think. But the way they're going to think the right things is by thinking through moral arguments. So really what you should be doing is just be thinking about moral arguments, not be trying to think about what people will think in the future. And then what he does, and then he imagines what they'll think in the future, not by a result of their moral argumentation, but by their biases that arise as a result of technological utopia and surplus. And so, but I mean, then also it's very debatable whether actually people in the future would say involuntary restrictions of will are always immoral. They would say, well, if we were all starving, it would be okay to forcefully tax the wealthy ones to prevent everyone from starving. And so, I mean, So I suppose someone could just argue against T-Jump by pointing out that that's probably not the conception of morality that people will have in the future. In terms of practical morality, they maybe won't have to talk about involuntary restrictions of will if in their practical circumstances you never need to do it. But if they were to envision practical circumstances in which there weren't infinite resources, then they would say it would be good to involuntarily restrict someone's will.
Like the fact that you can imagine some scenario where we'd be more likely to get the morality right doesn't mean that that's what determines the objective morality or anything. So if you asked philosophers, I think they'd be more likely to get morality right. That doesn't mean that morality is determined by what philosophers believe. That there's no objective morality absent.
Although it seems like what he's saying here in the most recent section is a little bit in line with that view. That he thinks it doesn't determine what's right, but they are more likely to get it right.
Yeah, but then
which
we would agree with. Then this doesn't disagree with utilitarianism. It's just a trivial thing. On this point, there's a kind of funny paper by Humer called, I think it is, A Liberal Realist Reply to Debunking Skeptics, where he argues that the trend towards liberalism is evidence for objective morality. And the reason we've been moving towards liberalism is because liberalism is objectively correct. Though abstract is really blunt. It's kind of funny.
Action is still immoral. Just watch any of my content on the topic. But
actually, I have watched your content. If you'd like, could I mention
You're so ignorant. I just corrected you.
Could I mention you verbatim quoted a specific timestamp?
I'm
really sure that I have in fact watched
topic. I literally just told you what my position is. You're wrong.
You said at 1:04 your debate with Omni, the objectively moral thing is the best.
I get to tell you you're wrong. You're a dumbass.
Wow, this isn't his debate with me. I feel so honored.
I don't know why you're so upset about this. I'm being pretty polite to you, and I'm being extremely polite to you while you're being demonstrably wrong.
All right. We gotta get this. We gotta get this back on track. But
yes, like I've said 10 times.
But Synth does deserve to get to finish his point. We have been
not when he's straw mans. No one gets to finish the point if it's just a straw man me, waste my time, and he's a dumbass. I'm going to tell him he's a dumbass and get his back.
That's fair. And when you straw man me, I'll interrupt. Okay.
Drinking game. Take a drink every time you hear the phrase "dumbass." You'll be dead from blood alcohol poisoning.
The thing is, in a debate, you can't stop it every time you think the other person is straw manning you. If you always think they're straw manning you when they seem to be criticizing your view.
Yeah, Christopher Green asks whether we're theists, atheists, or agnostics. I am a ardent atheist, and Chris is a marginally less ardent, but still pretty ardent atheist.
Yeah.
Fair. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So, but Synth said, the reason I bring this up is the best of all possible worlds up is because from my perspective, they are more likely to be right about morality.
I never said that.
I didn't say you did.
You just said Synth said.
You said. Oh yeah. You said
yeah, it's all right. Maybe that was a different sentence you're talking about.
You said they were not more likely to be right about objective morality, right?
I said what?
That the world that's super technologically advanced is not more likely to be right about objective morality, something like that. Or you said they could be wrong or something.
They could be wrong. Yeah, I never said that they were more likely to be wrong.
I asked you, are they more likely to be right about objective morality?
I would say yes. They are more likely to be right. I believe that the system they'll use in the future, it seems that people are trending more and more towards my system. So this would probably be strong evidence they'll be right about morality.
All right. So in the future, they're more likely to be right about morality. So if we're trying to determine what is the correct usage of morality, we should probably go with their mod, not ours, correct?
We don't know their model, so there's no way we could do that.
That wasn't part of the question. If we did, we would more likely go with their model.
If we did, it would likely be the case, yeah, that we should use the large, broad. We should do like logical difference. Yeah.
Right.
So we don't know theirs, so we can't do
I
that.
didn't say we did. Not the point here. So if someone had a model that does seem to indicate what theirs will be, like if we had some model that predicts in the future the things that they will see and it gives testable predictions right, and so it's more likely to do that, should we go with that model?
If it was the case we had access to it, yes, but we don't, so we shouldn't.
Luckily we do. It's mine. Congratulations. So
No, it's not.
How does he know that his model is what their model is?
Even in your system, you can see that we should do things which are immoral.
He claims that his model makes novel testable predictions. Now, none of them have been confirmed. But also, novel testable predictions are obviously not the only way of knowing things about the world. Like, history rarely makes novel testable predictions.
Well, you said this in Omni's debate.
Yes, just
if this is
immoral actions,
yeah.
yes.
So then, in that case,
We're
we should
non-naturalists.
use your moral system.
Christopher Green.
Yeah. Well, it depends on exactly what you mean by
Yeah.
naturalist.
You're
But
right.
so
more of a
Oppie
naturalist.
believes in moral realism. He believes in some version of truth with truth makers, or as he says, he likes that view. In my chat with Oppie, which you can also watch. Well, I'm really just doing like shameless, plugging of blog posts in the channel, but yeah, we're both non-physicalists. Yeah.
Don't mind.
Yeah, we both believe in magic, extra spirit stuff in order to explain what's going on in the brain. Yeah, I think Chalmers is basically right about consciousness.
So it makes sense that you're
That doesn't
wrong
make
and
any
you
sense.
conceded the debate. Yes, it
There's no
does.
logic there. No.
We shouldn't
No.
use your moral system because
No,
we should do things
No, there's no logic. No, dumbass. No, you're dumbass.
that are under your system immoral.
That's a competition division fallacy, saying that there are some things that you should do that are immoral doesn't mean that you should do all things. And
I didn't say that.
Whether or not we adopt
That's a straw
morality
man.
has nothing to do with
I never said you should do all immoral actions.
No,
I said we
no.
shouldn't use your moral system.
Right, which is a moral statement, and using a moral system isn't morality. So it's a competition division fallacy. So you're saying that
No, it's not.
because in your system, sometimes you should.
I'm not even clear what he's saying.
Yeah, I don't know either.
And Christopher Green, if you're interested in talking about physicalism, see my blog post against dogmatic physicalism, where I destroy physicalism with facts and logic. Or better, read Chalmers' book, The Conscious Mind. Wait, that's the name of the book, right? I'm not.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Do immoral things. Therefore, we should not
I just stole my arguments from Chalmers, basically.
use your moral system, which isn't a moral thing. So you're dumb.
So it's just this
Synth is dumb. Right.
isn't even anywhere close to the argument I just gave you. In the case of your moral system, not a composition division fallacy. In the case of the argument you're giving, there are things we should do that in your system are immoral, and thus we shouldn't do things based on whether or not they correspond to your system. So clearly, if the things we should and shouldn't do, yes,
So
it does. That's not even. Well, yeah, you're right. Literally just like proof by citation. It's not a logical argument at all. I agree. It's just like I'm just recording what you said.
Your premise first conclusion.
It's proof by citation. It's not a premise conclusion. I just took.
citation.
Yeah, I took your premise, slightly rephrase it, and suddenly you have an issue with it.
You're dumb. So now
You're-
I'm
you're-
moving an argument.
you're-
You
your motions
said,
and stuff.
stop. You made an argument that we shouldn't use my model because my model says we should do things that are immoral.
No, your model says there are certain things which are immoral that we should do. And if that's
It's
the case,
literally a
then we
synonym of what I
should.
just said. You're an idiot.
Then we shouldn't
So
do.
what is-
Then we shouldn't do.
how?
No, it's absolutely different. One thing is the reasoning is one, and then we come to the other.
They literally are the
conclusion.
same words
One
at
there-
different points in the sentence, you idiot. So
yeah, different points in
why-
the sentence means there is different meaning there, Tom.
No,
So
they're
if I-
not. You can say the
okay,
same sentence
if
in
I-
different words.
Yeah, if you rearrange words in a sentence, you never change the meaning. So if you say, I am on the dog Pluto, or if you say, I'm on Pluto with the dog, that is the same as saying, I am on the dog with Pluto. That's a bad example, but like, they're obviously, obviously like,
Or but I have an example. I am sad. Sad I am. And those mean different things. Well, actually, they mean the same thing. We should just come up with examples where they mean the same thing when you rearrange them.
Well, no, but we want examples where they mean different things.
But then we could support T-Jump's view.
True. Yeah, I feel like T-Jump's view does need some support.
We need Steel Manning.
Support.
order, it's still the
All
same
right.
sentence. You're an idiot.
If I said
Explain how.
no, just you can mix the orders of words up, Tom, and it can be a different sentence. Okay.
Yes, and it can be the same sentence. It can be synonyms. You're an idiot.
You can
Answer the question.
It's possible.
Good example in the chat. I am sorry.
Tom, that's
Yes,
not the
it's
argument
possible,
you're
which
making.
we literally
The thing
just
that I
did.
the thing that I
Answer
gave
the
you,
question.
Tom.
Go back to
Tom,
the
the
topic.
example I gave
Idiot.
is relevant to the topic.
No,
Okay.
it's not.
What? You tell me how
The
it's
topic
irrelevant.
you
I'll try my
addressed
best to
on
stay on
is you made
topic
an
for you,
argument.
Tom.
You made an argument that because my model says we should do some things that are immoral, that it labels as immoral, we should not adopt this model. That's an argument. There's no middle premise there. Like, my model says that the thing that is the least evil is the thing that we should do.
The
And
thing
I
we should
label
do
that
is
as
the one which is the
immoral.
least evil, and you label
Yes.
that as immoral. So
Sure.
all actions.
Wait, but he also says at another point that there was no fact of the matter about what we should do.
Yeah, this is just a linguistic mess. Okay,
No.
you disagree on what evil is.
Immoral. You're an idiot.
Sure. So just because you
Well, I think it's really persuasive how T-Jim keeps calling Synth an idiot and a dumbass. I really find that compelling.
claimed that I didn't watch any of your. You didn't claim any about watching any of your like past stuff. I usually don't like to bring up things that like people have said in past debates because I think it's usually unfair. But now that you're like challenging me on it, I think it's fair here.
What
In
does
the
this
case
have
of
to
your
do with the
on-
topic? What does that
it's-
just
it's-
asked?
well,
What
it's a
does
debate.
this have
It's
to
a
do with what I
debate you
just
had.
asked?
Yeah, it's a debate you've had on the topic, right? So I'm gonna bring up a claim you made relevant to it. Like just wait.
No, I want the question I literally just asked.
sorry, what is your
On
question?
the topic.
Let me make sure I answer.
You argued that because my model labels things as immoral and that we should do them, something along that
Yes.
lines, that we should not adopt my model. Now, this is a
Correct.
stupid, dumbass argument because my model, because yours agrees. Like, you agreed at the beginning that my model and yours predict that we should do the same things in many cases, right?
We should do the same things, yes. And your model, under your model, you should have my ethical system.
Wait. So our models prescribe the same things in many cases, correct?
Do you think, just for the record, do you think you have truth about what you believe? I mean, do you think you have capability to choose what you have, what you believe?
No.
You don't think you can choose what you believe?
No, I'm a determinist. I think everything's determined. What does this have to do with the topic?
Oh, okay. So what I'm saying is like, oh, you're determinist. So like anything you do necessarily would be like the best possible action you could do.
No.
You're a determinist.
Yes.
There's one action you can do.
You said you were going to answer the question. You haven't answered the question. We're still on
Well,
this
yeah,
one question.
this is a premise for my answer, but it's okay. We can just go on. I'll make sure to answer your question super directly. I'll give you like a yes or no, then I'll elaborate.
Okay. So you said we should not adopt my model because it prescribes that we should do things that are immoral or something like that. Now, your model and my model, as you said in the beginning, prescribe the same things. Like, go from the trolley problem, we say flip the switch, right? We agree, flip the switch. The difference is that I call it immoral and you call it moral.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that the only difference here, the reason we shouldn't adopt my model is because it gives a different label to the action, even though it prescribes the same action.
Do you think there's not different utility and using different definitions for different words? Like, don't you think you should use the word that's going to communicate your idea the most effectively?
Sure.
Okay, so then if you're using a word like immoral, which would apply to basically every single action, since it's not the best, we're not doing it in the best possible world.
No, it does not apply to every single action.
Well, you made the claim in your Omni debate that like the action you should, or the action which is moral, would be the one that you could do if you have infinite power, right?
Sure.
This is so we don't have.
I mean, this is not a super useful guide to like addressing criticisms of utilitarianism. It's like no one makes the criticism that like, well, utilitarian is subjective. It only says what we should do in the actual world, not the best of all possible worlds.
Nope, I have to bring it back again.
Wow. Classic. What's up, friends in the chat? Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, TGM is demanding $50. Like, TGM says he'll debate me if I pay him $50. I don't really want to pay him $50. I'd rather, like, you know, spend that money on making you better, you know, by, like, donating it to make people not get malaria. But I also would really like to debate TGM.
All right. I have to go pick up my roommate who's stuck at a train station.
Oh, okay.
I could join on my phone and talk while I'm driving. Otherwise, you'll be in the car. So.
Should we just?
I'll be back in like 30 minutes.
Should we just resume this later?
We could do that, yeah.
Or should I just continue streaming?
I think either works. Yeah, we could either resume later, potentially in 30 minutes, or you could keep streaming and I could rejoin in 30 minutes, or we could resume.
All right, I think I'll keep streaming.
All right.
Right. Peace out. Well, okay.
Have infinite power, so there's no action we could do that would ever include the trait of being done with infinite power.
No,
so there's no action.
So if somebody wants a piece of candy, if you have infinite power, the moral thing to do is to give them a piece of candy. I also have a piece of candy. I could also give them a piece of candy, and that's also moral. So having infinite power doesn't mean that literally nothing you can do is moral. It just means that it's a contingent thing that says if what you want is infinite candy, obviously I can't give you infinite candy, but I can do a moral
What is he saying?
thing, which is not the most moral thing, by giving you a piece of candy. So that you can still do moral actions, and they're not all immoral. Picking up a rock isn't immoral.
Oh, well,
they're amoral actions, and there are immoral actions.
In that case, if you had infinite power, you should reduce suffering as much as possible, right? Or you, I'm not sure what your utility is, right? And the weird consequential portion. Oh, you should maximize
consent.
preferences. Okay.
Consent. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so you should maximize preferences.
Consent.
Okay. You should, what do you mean by consent?
I can have a preference that I want to smack you in the face, but allowing that would be immoral. So
a lot. So for
I feel like T-Jump does have a preference currently to smack something in the face. You know what? Let's just resume. Let's resume this later. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll be live again in 30 or so minutes. Peace.